Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, I'm Martin Ballard and this is episode 24 of this podcast series with Imagine Theatre, one of the biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre in the UK.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Don't forget, if you have missed any of the previous episodes with directors, choreographers and stars of Imagine Theatre shows, you can catch up with them at any time. They are all still available. And don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. In episode 23, you may remember, I took you behind the scenes at Imagine's headquarters in Coventry to meet some of the people who make the Imagine Theatre magic. In this episode, I've been joined by somebody who has been on this incredible journey with the company since day one, from Telltale and Wish to the Imagine Theatre company we know today. Business and Marketing Director Sarah Boden, how are you?
I'm good, Martin. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And thankfully now we are coming out of COVID-19 restrictions completely. We can see a bigger light at the end of the tunnel, but it's been a challenging time, hasn't it?
I don't think anybody quite realised, did they, on the 16th of March when Boris shut down the theatres 2020, just what the journey would be like. We never dreamt that we would be 2 years later still recovering from this. So the day we're recording this is the day that all the restrictions disappear. So today is a day of real optimism in the Imagine offices. We've had the face-to-face team meeting for the first time in 2 years. Yeah, so fingers crossed, we are ever hopeful and ever optimistic that we can all put this behind us and it can become a distant memory.
Well, let's talk about you to start with and your sort of formative years, the years before you became a Boden. Tell us about that and where your first love of theatre came from.
So I've always loved theatre. I've always been a theatre fan. I've always been taken to the theatre by my parents. My mum and dad had two very, very special friends who we got to know as Auntie Sally and Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul was the musical director for Bernard Delfont right through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So we had a real insight into the backstage world of theatre with Uncle Paul. We used to travel the country watching him direct musical theatre, work on pantomimes, and I did that right from a tiny age. We always went to the Coventry Theatre pantomime, which ultimately became the Belgrade Theatre pantomime. And in fact, my birthday is in the middle of August. But for I think it was my 8th birthday, my mum tells me that I didn't want a birthday party in August. I wanted to take all my friends to the pantomime. So pantomime's always been a really big part of my life, even though I never, ever dreamt as a child that it would become my career. It never entered my head that my love of pantomime could become what I did for a living, and that's where I think I'm really blessed, because it's a real love of ours, Steve and my real love, but it's become the thing that we do all day every day, so we're really lucky. But yeah, my formative years were spent mainly on a golf course, Martin, to be honest with you.
Nothing changes.
No, okay. No, but yeah, that was my teenage years. I spent them going around the country playing golf at national level, playing in major competitions, and playing for the county. Yeah, I never dreamt. I always thought that might be my career. I didn't think that it would take a completely different route.
And in terms of theatre, did you have aspirations to be a performer at any stage, or just the backstage stuff?
Oh no, never a performer, amateur only. I love a bit of amateur theatre. In my early 20s, that's how Steve and I met. We met after theatre doing a production of Nonsense. He was directing, I was playing one of the nuns. I've done multiple other musical theatre. I've played Maria in Sound of Music, Sally Smith in Me and My Girl, lots and lots of other things. Had the pleasure of playing a part in Annie in a local production alongside my own daughter playing Annie. But no, never on stage, always backstage, and my love of watching.
So in those early days, you of course had a totally separate career, didn't you?
I did, yeah. After graduating from Nottingham University, I went on to the graduate training programme at Marconi, which was a very large organisation in Coventry, where I'm from. And I spent 5 years at Marconi travelling around the company doing my graduate training programme, multiple different departments in sales, in commercial law, in marketing, in project management. We had different placements in different parts of the business as part of our management training. And then from there, when Marconi's sad demise took place, and I spent a lot of the time working on sadly the big redundancy program that they had to go through. I then moved to Taylor Woodrow, where I worked in their HR department for a couple of years. Then I moved on to a company called IMI, where I worked as a management consultant. It never crossed my mind that would become something that I would do, and I would use my business background and my finance knowledge and my marketing knowledge and my commercial law understanding to work in a company such as this, and to use that to form the business plan for this company. It never entered my mind that I would enter the Steve's world at some point.
And obviously you supported him all the way through, but do you remember those early days? Those were exciting days, really, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. So, I would come home from my job at night and I would help Steve in the evening. Steve and I first got together in 2001, which is 8 years before we took the company over, and we took over the full ownership of the company, and 5 years before I started working full time at Imagine. So I've been here now for best part of 16 years full time, and Steve's been in the company for 23, 24 years full time. Yes, it was exciting. We were very much on a learning curve, learning our craft, learning how things worked, and learning it together and using our complementary skills. Because Steve is so creative and so clever in pantomime, but also he's got a really great business mind, very creative. And then I was sort of sitting behind the scenes, just quietly making things happen and putting the processes and procedures behind the scenes to make things happen, to become the structure that we have today.
At what point did you jointly, perhaps the two of you, decide that you should join the company? Because, it did really take off, didn't it? And it really needed that extra support.
Yeah, it did. So our daughter was born in January 2006, and I had to make a decision at the end of my maternity leave. What do I do? Do I go back to my previous career, or do I stay working with Steve? Because I'd been helping and supporting him during my maternity leave. And that was the point at which we said, no, I'm not going to go back to my career. We're going to work together to achieve our dream. We both had the same ambition. We both had the same dream. We just came at it from different angles, from our different skills that we both had. So really, I really started to work at Imagine from the summer of 2006 onwards, although I'd been behind the scenes and quietly there in previous years before.
In terms of the growth of the company, it's been incredible, hasn't it? Because year on year, almost without fail, let's take out the COVID situation for a year, 18 months, but almost without fail, since the inception of Imagine Theatre, the growth has been continual, hasn't it? In terms of number of shows you have, staff you employ, and so on.
It has, and it's taken us quite by surprise, really. We had a dream. It was never quite meant to be like this, but the dream was always there. And I'll never forget, I said to Steve when we very first met, what would you really like to do? And this was way back in 2001, so 21 years ago. And he said, I'd really like to produce pantomime in a number one venue. And it was about 7 or 8 years later that he literally looked at me and went, oh my goodness. And I said, what? He went, we've done it. And I didn't even realise we'd done it because we'd been so busy making it happen. The fact that we'd achieved what Steve wanted to do had completely passed us by. And that's what happens when you're building a business. Sometimes you don't take enough time to step back and look at what you've actually achieved.
The growth has come in all sorts of areas as well, in terms of, for instance, you've acquired more and more sets, props, costumes. Sadly, some companies have fallen by the wayside. You've bought out their entire wardrobe. You've picked up other things along the way. You've had to move premises, of course, a couple of times, because in the early days, sets, costumes and so on were in disparate buildings all over the country.
Absolutely, yeah. We started off in a barn in Banbury. And then we moved to a premises in Coventry with our wardrobe store in York. And then finally, we've ended up with a large premises in Coventry, but we've completely outgrown it. So we now have an extra store over in Stratford-upon-Avon. When we bought the building that we now live in and is now our head office back in 2011, we never dreamt that we would outgrow it because it's enormous, but it's completely full and we have completely outgrown it. Again, it was never meant to be like that, but it's a really pleasant surprise that it's turned out the way that it has.
Now, here's the interesting thing. Let's talk about what you do, what your job entails, because I think in many ways it's a hidden part of the business that people don't realise is there. There is so much that you do that without it, shows could never happen, and yet people don't really think about that sort of aspect. Policies and health and safety and so on, and the business plan and budgets and managing staff and so on. That's all down to you, isn't it?
Yeah, ultimately it is. I mean, I'm the kind of the silent partner in all of this, really. Steve's the one who has his biog in the programme, whereas if you put my biog in the programme, it would probably say Sarah spends all of her time looking at numbers. It is very much that kind of thing. Someone said to me once, gosh, your job must be so exciting. And I said, I cannot tell you how much I love my job and how lucky I am to do what I do. I love what I do. I love who I work with. But you mustn't lose sight of the fact that although our product is magical, wonderful, it goes on stage, it creates wonderful memories for families, there still has to be someone behind the scenes keeping the tax man happy, keeping the VAT man happy, making sure that we're compliant with all the health and safety regulations, making sure that all the policies and procedures are up to date, all the HR procedures are right, all the contracts are correct and up to date and legal. And I'm that person, basically. That's what I do. I sit behind the scenes and I make sure that everything that we have to do legally as an organisation happens and takes place.
And this is fortuitous in a way, because when Steve decided to expand the company and bring somebody in the role that you now have, he couldn't have found anybody any better with all the skills that were necessary. Because of all those jobs that you did before Imagine, you were perfect for this, weren't you?
Yes, I think that's true. It's really difficult to talk about yourself like that and go, yes, I'm perfect for a job. But no, I genuinely do think that Steve and I make a great team because we carry such complementary skills. And I know quite a few friends of mine who said, I couldn't work with my partner, I couldn't work with my husband, I couldn't work with my wife, but we've always been able to work together. We've been very lucky that way, that we've always been able to just work together and be able to understand what each other is thinking and to be able to make it happen. And I think part of that also is the fact that we're married, that we just both understand each other and we understand what makes each other tick. But yeah, absolutely. And when you're looking for staff, it's always difficult to find exactly what you're looking for. But to be able to find that in a partnership as well makes a really big difference.
Now, when we spoke during our behind-the-scenes look at your headquarters last month, we spoke briefly about MI workshops, which is the latest venture really for Imagine, isn't it, with you and Matthew Jakes, his previous Workshop Limited company, and this is already starting to take off in a major way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really fantastic contracts come through MI. As I said before, some people call it MI, some people call it MI. It can be either. Absolutely. I mean, we're very lucky that to have a partner like Matty. He's very experienced and very skilled in what he does. And it is about finding people who are like-minded. He has the same ambitions and the same drive that we have. So yeah, we're excited about what's coming for the future for that particular project. Lots of things in the pipeline. We're just waiting to hear on a couple of big contracts potentially. These are always what it's like. You sit and wait to hear whether you've been successful in a contract and whether you win it or not. Some you win, some you don't. That's business for you.
And we spoke briefly as well about Justin Live last time. It's been out on the road now for a while and it's been a major success. I think, fans of Justin have been waiting for so long to see him out there again.
Justin Live has had such positive feedback and we're absolutely thrilled about that. But the biggest thing that struck us is the children who hadn't been in the theatre for 2 to 3 years. And many of these children, aged sort of 3, 4, 5, 6, who may have never been in a theatre before because they've missed out on that initial opportunity to go because the theatres were closed. And tours like Justin Live are so important, not just because of the brilliant work that Justin does with additional needs, but also just because he makes his shows so accessible to absolutely everybody. And it brings families together into an environment that for the last couple of years we've been actively discouraged to stay away from. But now they know, no, it's safe to come back to the theatre. It's safe to do the things that we always used to do. And life is returning to some form of whatever normal is going to be moving forwards.
Yeah, we spoke about that at the beginning, restrictions lifted now and Imagine Theatre is in a good place, a successful panto season across the country despite 1 or 2 closures, and you're starting to recruit. Anybody who's been watching the company on social media will have seen the sort of people that you're looking for. You're looking to expand the company again.
It's looking looking to expand the company again. It's looking to reposition the team and rework the team, but also to welcome new people in. The pandemic put everything on pause and changed everything for us. Some of that was challenging, some of that was positive. Someone once said to me, don't let the opportunities that this pandemic will give you pass you by. An opportunity comes in many different shapes and forms. That could be the procurement of new contracts. That might be the ability to, as we are now, rearrange the team and rework certain roles that people have within the team. Lots of opportunities that the pandemic presents. But yes, super excited to be expanding the team and to be bringing new people into work for us. And we found some really, really exciting people to be working with over the last few months. We're optimistic and hopeful.
And with that in mind, we sort of teased last episode that you have some fantastic news to share with us. Now that's been out for a couple of weeks now, but just go into a bit more detail about the new venues that you've got.
Yeah, so we were approached a little while ago by Trafalgar Entertainment, who are the new owners of the HQ Theatre venues. Initially, we were asked to look at whether we were interested in taking on Panto in a couple of their venues. So we had some meetings with them and we talked through what that might look like. Before we knew it, the phone call then went along the lines of, we don't want you to look at 2 or 3 venues, we want you to look at 5, which I think was one of the only times in my pantomime career where I literally have been completely speechless. Oh my goodness me, that's an incredible opportunity. And again, opportunity comes around rarely in your life and you have a choice. You take it or you don't take it. Part of the job that I have to do is to look at the implications for the business as a business rather than the artistic implications. That's dealt with by Eric and by Steve and Laura and other members of our team who deal with the artistic side of business, whereas I have to look at it very much from a commercial perspective. Is that going to work for us? Is that a good option for us? Is it going to work financially? What impact does it have on our policies and procedures and all of that? And I have to think about that. But the more we thought about it, the more we were excited and thrilled and very honoured at the opportunity that we'd been presented with, and flattered that an organisation of such scale as Trafalgar would think that we were the right partner for them, which was very kind of them.
And that's quite a leap, isn't it? 5 extra venues means logistically you need 5 more casts, 5 more sets, 5 more sets of costumes, 5 more directors, the logistics of auditions and so on. It's a big leap, isn't it?
It is. It's all those logistics going on behind the scenes, which is part of the reason why Martin, you and I have sat down and looked at the way that we want to take Just Imagine as a podcast over the next year. We want to take our listeners on much more of a journey about what it's like behind the scenes here at Imagine and what that whole meaning is. You take on an extra project, what implication does that have? How do you go about managing the relationship with the venue, with different people that you might never have worked with before? Exactly that. How do we get the sets and costumes lined up? How many extra staff might we need at head office as a result for the extra workload that's brought around? All of those kind of planning and logistics is where my head instantly goes when an opportunity like that is presented. Whereas Steve's head also goes there, but he goes into the creative side of things and his head starts to plan what that might look like creatively. And so that's where the partnership really works.
And we spoke about the opportunities that came your way because of COVID. Instead of concerning yourself the entire time about what you were missing out on, what was being lost and so on, you took that time in so many different ways, in terms of cataloguing sets, costumes and so on, looking at the organisation of the company. But another thing that came out of it was Imagine Cares, which for those people who don't know, just explain how it worked, because it was innovative, certainly in terms of panto theatre companies and possibly in terms of theatre companies in general.
That's very kind, Martin. Yeah, so Imagine Cares, just to give you a little bit of background on me, I was giving you a little bit of background earlier, but I actually have my Chartered Institute in Personnel and Development, but specialising in training and development. So I spent my sort of early career after I left Marconi working in the HR department, but specialising in how to develop people's careers and how to mentor and care about people and to take them on a journey of their career journey. And it struck me during the pandemic that there was never anybody acknowledging the fact that this whole experience of going back into panto and back into theatre land was going to be a journey for people to go on. It was going to be a personal journey that none of us had ever ventured into before. And it was going to have a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being. And we wanted as an organisation to step forward and say, we understand that because it's exactly how we feel. At head office, we've been through exactly the same stresses and strains. We've been worried about whether the company would survive. We've been worried about our careers. We've been worried about our income. We've had staff on furlough. All the concerns that we're hearing from people, we've been through those same concerns ourselves to differing levels. Differing individuals in the organisation have been in different places at different times. But we wanted to step forward and say, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, because we all do, and it happens all the time. And then as we move out of the pandemic, hopefully the language we all use towards each other will be much more accepting of that whole process. And as the pandemic becomes a distant memory, I'd really like to think that Imagine Cares is a programme that builds year on year and just becomes part of the ethos of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, and I think that was welcomed by everybody who took part in any of the Zoom sessions or listened to the podcast or, engaged about Imagine Cares in any way. I have to say that the challenges of COVID are still around in some areas, noticeably the number of people, on the technical side in particular, who simply left the profession.
It is really sad that this is the kind of crisis that I don't think the world has quite realised is existing all over the country in lots and lots of different industries. I was speaking to my brother-in-law who works in the railway industry, and they're reporting a very similar situation, that they've lost a lot of skilled labour, partly potentially due to Brexit, but also due to the pandemic. And we are literally sitting on the edge of a crisis in the theatre industry, in that the theatre world is slowly getting back to full speed. And I would say it's probably back to about 70 to 80% right now. And we have a major skills shortage. Not quite sure how that extra 20% is going to be filled if, as we get back to really full speed and we get all the tours back out, we get all the productions back out, we get all the theatres back to full staffing levels as they were before. So it's a little bit concerning. We're not quite sure at the moment where that's all coming from. I'd like to think that a few people, maybe they've gone into TV rather than into theatre, but as theatre becomes a bit more stable, hopefully they'll come back to us. But it's hard to know really what's going to happen for the future. What we need to have as an industry is a really robust apprenticeship and training programme which brings young people through the ranks and rebuilds our industry, as well as encouraging the more experienced members of staff back to us.
Maybe the government should be looking at apprenticeships attached to companies like Imagine Theatre, for example.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we would really like to get started here. Is we would really like to get a strong apprenticeship programme running here. We've just got to get the company back on its stable footing, get it fully recruited, get it fully back to speed, and then that's one of the things that we will actively look to roll out here.
Yeah, I think it's important that it has government support in terms of funding and so on, though, doesn't it?
Oh gosh, but the government yes, absolutely, but I just at this point do need to say thank you to the government, because the Culture Recovery Fund has literally been a lifeline for those of us who work in the theatre industry. Without the Culture Recovery Fund and the support that we've been given, theatre would have literally fallen apart around the seams. It's walking on a tightrope right now. It's a very, very long tightrope that we're walking, and it's a very wobbly tightrope. But we are at least walking on that tightrope, and we have a chance to survive, and we have a lifeline. And that's thanks to the CRF. Without the CRF fund, we just wouldn't be here at all.
Now, we spoke in the office on the last episode about, Panto being a year-round profession, in terms of the countdown for next year begins on the last day of the previous year, and probably even before then. So what are the priorities for you in March?
It's budgets. It's just, we've already done a lot of work on the budgets. We understand a lot of what's going on with the budgets and how that's going to work. But we're really starting to hone them down right now. Understand what each pantomime has got as its budget, what it needs, what kind of staffing levels it's going to have. We're starting the initial waves of recruitment. We are looking at marketing, and so first prints of flyers are going out, first bits of campaigns are going out, initial names are being announced in venues that have star names. We've already got our wardrobe department up to full speed. They know exactly what costumes are going on what shows. They're working flat out on wardrobe right now on getting those costumes ready. The set department knows exactly what sets are going on our shows. They're already being prepped. We're going to have cloths on paint frames imminently. We're going to have scenic artists in the unit. So yeah, it's pretty flat out on what people would think may happen in the autumn. It's probably happening now.
And it's a bit of a baptism of fire for some of your new staff, but they are loving the experience already, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Particularly in wardrobe.
Oh, yeah. So Dawn, who many of you listeners will know well, who was our head of wardrobe, is currently on maternity leave. And we are very excited to welcome a new member to the Imagine family imminently. And so in the meantime, we have the wonderful Wendy Morton. Again, if anybody who's worked for us and has worked for us for many years may well know Wendy. Wendy's been out on venues doing pantomime for us probably for 14 or 15 years before coming and joining us at head office. She's taken over as head of wardrobe covering Dawn, and the fabulous Aaron is her deputy. So yeah, they're getting well stuck into it. And Wendy joined us in the middle of February. And it's been thrown into the deep end right from the start.
Now, the other thing I was going to say to you is that you've already mentioned that you've outgrown the premises. Is it possible or likely that Imagine Theatre may have to move again?
A really difficult question to answer right now. I think if you'd asked us that question 2.5 to 3 years ago, we'd have probably said, yeah, we'd like to move. The pandemic has obviously slowed that ambition down a little. But it doesn't mean it's not going to happen down the line. It just means that we just have to make sure that we're stable and we're able to do a big move like that before we do. Because if you're going to move premises, and if that's something you're considering, it has to happen over Christmas, when the sets go out from one home and come back into a new home. So you're not double handling everything. Because when we moved out of our old premises back in 2011-12, the panto season, everything went out from our old premises during panto season and then came home to its new premises at the end of panto season. So there is a very tight window of when a move like that can actually happen to make it financially viable to do it. So who knows? Watch this space, I guess. We have a business plan. Every business has a business plan, of course you do. But what we've learned over the years as well is that sometimes you just have to run with the changes that just arrive on your plate and the opportunities that presents, as well as the focused business plan that you have and the ambition that you have to make things happen.
I think we'll discount this Christmas.
I think so, Martin.
See what happens. Now, listen, I didn't ask you at the very beginning, but before I ask you about your favourite panto, can you remember the first panto you ever saw as a child?
I think I can. I think it was a production at Coventry Theatre, and I would have been about 4 or 5. I want to say it was Aladdin, but that doesn't mean it was Aladdin. But I just have a very vivid memory of the canopy of lights outside the building. That's the bit that excited me the most. There was this wonderful, what was just now a festoon of lights. It's just some 100-watt light bulbs, but it was that inviting canopy of lights that I wanted to go behind. And then I remember just being completely awestruck by what was evolving in front of my eyes, and the fact that my Uncle Paul was wagging in the pit and playing piano, and so I knew my Uncle Paul was part of it. But I just remember being completely blown away by the whole spectacle and the whole magical thing that was in front of me. So yeah, that's my first memory of panto. I don't remember who was in it. I just remember just being wowed by the whole experience.
And because Uncle Paul was involved, does that mean that the young Sarah got a chance to look behind the scenes or even go up for the song sheet or something?
We used to go behind the scenes. Uncle Paul used to take us behind the scenes, yeah. And during our younger years, whatever show he was doing, we used to go and see him, and we used to go in his dressing rooms, and we used to meet all the stars backstage. And I think it was just part of our childhood. We never realised how lucky we were. We never realised how ingrained in our psyche that would become, and what an important... I didn't appreciate until I was much older what an important impression he made on my life.
So you mentioned that first panto could have been Aladdin. Would that be the panto that you enjoy, or your favourite panto?
Absolutely not. No, I love Aladdin. Aladdin's one of my favourites, but it's not my favourite. My favourite, for multiple reasons, is Dick Whittington. Mm-hmm. I love Dick Whittington. I find it such an exciting adventure. I love the story. I love the comedy in it. In fact, one of my very favourite Dick Whittingtons we ever did, Martin, was with you at Loughborough Town Hall many, many years ago. And I think it was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be a producer and what it meant to put a production on. I think it was maybe our second or third year at Loughborough back in 2005, and I was pregnant with Holly at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was off work because I had quite a difficult pregnancy, and so I'd had much more time to get to know the panto world and to get to understand what it was about. And I think that will forever be one of my favourites in my mind for that reason. But also, our own daughter Holly was blessed with doing 6 pantomimes at the Belgrade Theatre, Coventry, as a junior ensemble member. She did her final one this Christmas just gone. And her very first pantomime as a junior ensemble member was Dick Whittington. So it just, everywhere I turn, for me, personal experience seems to relate to Dick Whittington.
Well, I mean, Steve chose that as his favourite as well, and he talked about The Great Adventure. I remember, I've done it a few times actually, but I remember that one, and it brings back happy memories. Of course, the fabulous ship, the adventure itself, and of course, I think Sean Lloyd was actually at the Belgrade, wasn't he, last year? He was King Rat in Dick Whittington that year at Loughborough, and that fabulous safe scene with the creaky floorboard was just comedy gold.
Absolutely, and I just love pantomime. I love every title. I don't think it's hard to say a favourite in terms of which one I love the most. I would say I have the happiest and most fondest memories of Dick Whittington, which is why I probably like it as my favourite. And that's what I love so much about it. I think if you were to say, can you sum up pantomime in one word? I'd find it quite hard, but I think my favourite would be it's just silly. We get, as an adult, we get to escape into a world that's just funny and anything goes and anything can be, and we just have a laugh and we just enjoy being part of something that is uniquely British and great fun. And that makes me very happy.
Me too. And that's a very good point to end on, Sarah. Thank you so much for talking to us. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the series to catch up with any episodes you've missed, and make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Next time, I'll be taking you on a behind-the-scenes tour of sets and props at Imagine headquarters. So make sure you join me then.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.